it's Nina. I'm so happy you're joining me today for a brand new Studio Monday. Today I'm here with a card featuring the adorable Clearly Besotted Caped Cuties stamp set. I absolutely love these adorable little superheroes that are included in the stamp set. You can see all of them that are here. I think the turtle on this set is my absolute favorite. He is just so cute. But you can see there's so many other different types of little superheroes and some supporting elements and also a bunch of different sentiments. I'm going to be creating a birthday card using almost all of the little images that are included in the stamp set. So almost all of the critters are going to be on this card. I think I only missed one of them. I think I ran out of room and didn't have any room for the cat. But you could go ahead and switch them out for the ones that you like most or even try to fit in that cat, but I liked it without. So I'm going to go ahead and stamp all of these 5 critters. I'm using my Misty stamping tool and some Simon Says Stamp Intense Black dye ink. I love this ink for Copic coloring because that's what I'm going to be doing for my card. And I'm going to be doing some double stamping just to make sure I have a super dark impression. So you can see here that Misty makes it so easy to go ahead and stamp it again. So that way I have it in the perfect place. For my coloring, I'm going to go ahead and show you the colors on the side of the screen here so you can easily replicate the color combinations. I'm going to start off with this little mouse. I colored him first with a complete layer of cool gray 1. And I went back over top of that with warm gray 1. And that gives this mouse a little bit of a warmer tone to him without being too warm. I'm going to add shading with my W5 and W3 markers, and I'll just go ahead and blend that out with my lighter colors. And I'm going over top of the darkest shading a couple times just to make sure that I get that good contrast, because contrast is what helps your image have a lot of depth and dimension and realism. For the little mask on this little guy, I'm going to use some blues, and I also am using reds for the cape. I'm going to be using similar colors for all of these critters, not only because it's easy for you to replicate, but it's also easier for me because it's less markers I have to try to match up with together. So if I use the same colors, because I'm using all of these critters on the same card, this will make sure that I have them matching perfectly because I use similar color tones throughout the entire card. For this turtle, I gave him a red mask, and now I'm working on his body. I'm using YG91 and YG95 for his body. I'll go ahead and blend that out a little. And then for the little shell, I'm going to use a bunch of YG markers, just in a variety of different light tones. I'll have them all listed here on the side so you can see which colors exactly I used. And I randomly just colored each little hexagon on this turtle with different colors. And I really like how this ended up working out. It gave him a little bit of a fun look and also matched nicely with the rest of the card. I love that extra pop of green. Moving on to the bunny, I'm going to color his cape or her cape. It could be a girl or boy. I'm coloring its cape with some light blue markers, the same ones that I used on the mouse, and I'm going to color its mask with the same reds. I added shading along the bottom portion of each mask. I just liked where that shading was, and I wasn't worried too much about a light source. I'm just making sure that when I do add a light source on each image that all the light is coming from the same directions. So like in the case of the body, it's coming from the right hand side, so I'm coloring all of the left hand areas with a darker color, and then the lighter areas are on the right. Alright, now I'm moving on to the little teddy bear. I just love how cute he is. I went a little bit darker with him. I used a E33, and then I'm using the same colors that I used on the bunny for the rest of his body. But I wanted that slightly darker tone so that way he stood out from the other animals. And so that way each animal had a slightly different look, but again, they all coordinated because the color tones were all very similar. So I added color to his body. In this bear's case, the light is coming from the left-hand side, so I'm adding the shading on the right-hand areas. But again, you can do whatever you want. I wasn't too worried about light source. I was just making sure that when I did have a light source, it was coming from the same direction throughout the entire image. So I'll color in his cape and mask with the same colors that I used on all the other critters. And I switched them up a little bit. You can see I added blue masks on some of them and red masks on others. I just kind of switched it up a little bit to give it a little bit of extra fun, and I love how these colors all coordinated so well together. For the dog, I'm using some warm grays for his body. I'm giving him a lighter colored body, and then I'm going to add some darker colored spots using my darker warm grays. So here for his body, I'm using W00, W1, and W3, and for his spots, I'm using W5 and W7. And I really think this adds a lot to this dog. Adding those little spots in really makes him look a lot cuter. I think he's adorable. Alright, so I'll keep coloring him in and adding in extra shading to make sure that I get those darker areas with a little bit extra contrast because again, that's going to help them stand out a lot more. I'm going to color in his little medal, and then I'm using that same red color for his mask. And again, for this animal, I'm using the right hand side for the shadows and the left hand side for the lighter colors. Once I finished coloring them in, I'm going to go ahead and trim them out so that way I can start fussy cutting. I love to add a white border around my images when I don't have the coordinating dies. This helps them look like they've been die cut. Fussy cutting is actually pretty easy once you get the hang of it. The biggest tips I can give you are two things. One, practice makes perfect. I know that is the case for a lot of things, but it really is true. I have practiced fussy cutting for many, many years now, and I just have gotten very used to it, and it comes very easy for me now. The other big key is to make sure you move the paper, not the scissors. So you can see as I'm moving my paper around, the scissors are staying in relatively the same spot because I'm moving the paper, and that's going to give me a smoother cut. So hopefully those tips will help you out a little bit with fussy cutting. Again, like I said, it's practice makes perfect, so you do have to keep practicing at it to get better. Alright, moving on to my die cutting, I've got the Storybook 4 die set from Pretty Pink Posh. This is a brand new die from them. And I've also got a Simon Says Stamp Stitched Rectangle die. I'm creating a panel for my critters to stand on. You can see once I remove the Storybook die, there's a bunch of little squares that you could use for something else, but I'm not using them on this card. I'm just going to be using this outer portion where it has the cute little frame, almost looks like a window to me. I'm also going to be taking the new Happy Days dies. These coordinate with an older stamp set that came out a couple months ago, and I love these dies because they're simple shapes that can be used for anything. I've got a bunch of cards coming up that I've used these dies. I've used the sun, I've used the clouds, and they work perfectly for using just as the simple shapes. And all of the other dies, almost all of them, you could use with just the shapes. You don't even need the stamp set, which is really fun. I love how you can stretch something like that. Alright, so I'm working on some ink blending. Here I've got some cracked pistachio distress ink, and I'm adding some ink onto my panel. This is a watercolor panel. Here I've got some tumbled glass. I'm going to blend this in as well. I've got a total of 3 different colors that I'm using for this panel. I've got some cracked pistachio and tumbled glass like I mentioned, but I'm also going to be using some salty ocean as well for some darker blue. And I'm going to be doing this to create a really beautiful blended sky. This is going to look really fun. And that cracked pistachio, believe it or not, even though I'm covering over top of it with my tumbled glass, and I will be as well with the salty ocean, it peeks through the colors and adds just a little bit extra fun to this card panel that I think would have looked a little bit different if I had not used that cracked pistachio. So go ahead and blend your ink colors together, even though it seems kind of weird to use something over top of it. When we add the water droplets and other texture and stuff, that really brings those colors out. So I'm going to keep adding color. I'm going to take my distress sprayer and add a bunch of splatters and droplets to this card. I'm going to dab them off with a baby wipe, and then I also did dry this panel because I wanted to dry them in between layers because this is how I work with distress inks. I work with layers so that way I can build up intense color. This is how I maintain that dark, intense, bright colors that I always get with my distress inks because I love when they're bright and bold. So I did these steps 3 different times. I did the ink blending, I added the water, and then I dried it, and I did that again, like I said, 3 times. And that gave me a much more intense background than if I had just left it with 1 layer. Alright, so I'll go ahead and spritz on some more water, I'll dry that, and then after the 3rd layer, I did the exact same thing. Here I've got some more distress ink, and this time I've got a piece of page protector. You could use a piece of plastic or acetate, whatever you want. I'm going to be putting some ink on here, spritzing it with water, and then I'm going to pounce this on, so I'm going to be doing some ink smooshing. I'm going to pounce this on to my background, and this is going to give my background texture. The clouds, of course, are picking up some of it, but it is laying down on different portions of the background, and this adds a little bit extra texture to this paper that otherwise would not have had it if I had only left it with the water droplets. And I think this really adds a lot more interest to the background. Go ahead and play with things and mix and match and try to come up with your own way of using your distress inks to create some amazing backgrounds because these distress inks are limitless. You can create anything with these things. So after I dried this once again, my background is completely dry. I think this would also look great as a water for like an underwater scene. I'm removing the masks so that way I can go ahead and finish up my background. I had just adhered these masks with some temporary adhesive and I just rubbed it off in spots where it still stuck to the paper. But for the most part, it came right off. Put my panel together. I'm taking some foam tape and I'm cutting it down into teeny tiny strips to add it to the back side of this Pretty Pink Posh frame. So you can see we can't see those foam tape pieces through the front because we're cutting them down so small to make sure they fit. I'll go ahead and keep adding tape along this frame until I have it completely covered. Then I'll go ahead and remove the adhesive backing, and I will pop this right up onto my cloud panel. And you can see how fun this looks. I'm just going to get the perfect placement. I think I like it right there. I'll go ahead and press that down good, and then I'll go ahead and trim off the excess with my scissors just to make sure that I don't have it overhanging. Alright, now I'm going to start putting my critters on. I'm popping these up with 2 layers of foam tape because I want them to be raised up off of the panel that's in the background, but also this little storybook frame that we die cut. So I'm going to use, like I said, 2 layers of foam tape. I'll remove the adhesive backing, and then I'll go ahead and pop them onto my card. And you can see how much extra dimension that these have once you've added that double layer of foam tape. And I really love how these guys are laying out on this card. This was a really fun card for me to create, and this would be perfect for any little boy or girl's birthday. Alright, now I need to do my sentiment, so I'm taking one of the sentiments that's included in the Caped Cuties stamp set. I'm prepping some black cardstock with some powder, and I'm going to stamp my sentiment using Simon Says Stamp Clear Embossing Ink. This ink is perfect for all of your heat embossing needs. I absolutely love it. I use this one exclusively now that it came out back in May. I'll go ahead and press that down good onto my paper, and then I'll go ahead and heat emboss that with white embossing powder. Now after I heat embossed it, I wanted to trim it down into a little strip of paper. So I'm taking my tonic trimmer and I'm going to go ahead and trim this down. And then I'll go ahead and pop this up onto my card using some foam tape. I just used 1 layer for this because I wanted it to be a little bit recessed from the critters because I want the critters to stand out most of all on this card. Alright, so now I need some extra embellishing. So here I've got some adhesive backed foil paper. This is printable foil from Silhouette. You can use this with your Silhouette Cameo, but I love using this for foiling effects. So I'm taking this Holiday Shapes die. This is a really handy die that is exclusive to Simon Says Stamp. I'm going to die cut a bunch of the little stars, and because they're adhesive backed, I can go ahead and use these as stickers. So I'm just going to go ahead and pop these onto my card, and until you press them down, you can actually play around with the placement of these. Once you press them down, they are stuck well onto the paper. But if you don't press it down, you absolutely get to be able to move things around and kind of play with the placement a little bit. So you can see here, I'm just removing the adhesive backing, and I'll go ahead and pop them onto the panel. And for a final touch, I'm just going to whiten the white highlights of these little critters' eyes because it helps them stand out a little bit more. And that's going to do it. I hope you've enjoyed and got some inspiration on using the Caped Cuties stamp set from Clearly Besotted. If you have any questions, be sure to leave them in the comments section below. And head on over to the Simon Says Stamp blog where you can get more information on this card, including still pictures and products used. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and you can find us on social media at Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Pinterest, YouTube, as well as our blog. Thanks so much for watching. We'll see you again soon.